On 7 Up Front tonight, the issue of voter suppression in Michigan and across the country. I'm pleased to be joined by Eliza Swearenbecker from the Brennan Center for Justice, a national nonpartisan law and policy institute. Eliza, thank you for being there tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's begin with legislative efforts in multiple states, Georgia, Florida, also here in Michigan and others, to change the election process. Republicans are calling it voter reforms, but many view it as efforts at voter suppression with these bills. What's the assessment of the Brennan Center?
Well, there is indeed a wave of voter suppression efforts in states across the country, and we have seen these laws pass in places like Georgia, Iowa, Florida, Arizona, and several other states as well. And there are many bills still pending that would make it harder for Americans to vote. And the vast majority of these bills are being advanced under the pretext that there was some sort of election irregularity, or there are some sort of problems with our elections that need to be fixed. But the fact is that that's not the case. Our elections last year were the most secure in American history, and there is no problem of widespread voter fraud or election irregularity in this country. And so that rationale is really just a pretext. It's a lie to justify making it harder for Americans to cast their ballots.
Yeah, in fact, court after court, right, affirmed the integrity of the election in November. There's been no credible evidence of a stolen election. So is this simply sour grapes from an ex-president and his supporters fueling all of this?
Well, it seems like state legislators are seizing on the lies of the ex-president and others, and using that as a justification to curtail voting access in ways that these state lawmakers think are going to help them in their partisan political battles. But of course, all of these restrictions on voting access are going to hit Americans across the board, regardless of political party.
Some are going to pass, others are going to be rejected, vetoed by governors with Democratic governors, for instance. Are these efforts, though, a threat to our democracy, as some are arguing?
Absolutely, they're a threat to our democracy. In states where these restrictions do pass, they're going to make it harder for Americans to vote. And it's simply undemocratic in principle to try to restrict or make it more difficult for Americans to exercise that fundamental right to vote.
One of the most talked about rule changes in Georgia is that prohibition against groups distributing water and food to voters waiting in line to cast their ballots. I mean, really?
Yeah, it does seem like a particularly cruel provision, especially in a place like Georgia that has a long history of long lines. So voters are often waiting in long lines in Georgia in heat or in bad weather. And to prohibit the provision of snacks and water to make that wait a little more comfortable while Americans are just trying to exercise their right to vote is, really a bridge too far, in addition to all the other restrictions that the Georgia legislature.
Have you seen any positive proposals come out of this?
Absolutely. I think we're also seeing state houses across the country focus on, or some state houses, I should say, focus on making it easier for Americans to cast their ballot and learning lessons that we took away from last year when more Americans voted by mail and we saw the different ways that Americans like to vote. So we have, expansions of early voting in New Jersey, for example. We have efforts to expand who can vote absentee in many states. And in Washington and New York, there's legislation passed that restored the right to vote to people with past convictions. So there are also states that are, making gains in protecting the right to vote and making sure that Americans can cast their ballots safely.
Excellent. We have to leave it there tonight. Eliza Swearenbecker from the Brennan Center for Justice, thank you for joining us tonight and discussing this subject with us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. We'll switch